Hello, fight fans, and welcome to the Combat Challenge podcast. My guest is an MMA athlete who competes in the middleweight division under the guidance of head coach Paul Rimmer from Next Generation MMA Liverpool, and is the former Cagewarriors Middleweight Champion, Mr. Matthew the Beast Bonner. Matt, thank you so much for joining us again, my brother.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Well, the last time we spoke, my friend, it was back in May, and at that time you were talking about having a fight, hopefully in June, against Matthias Frederick, who at the time was on an 8-fight winning streak and was undefeated. On an 8-fight winning streak, and he was the middleweight champion, right?
That's right. Yeah, he was a little bit of a monster at the time. He was a monster of the division. No one really wanted to fight him.
And tell me what made you want to take that fight, and what did you know about Matthias leading into that fight?
I wanted to take the fight because it was the Cagewarriors title, and everyone kind of knows, you win the Cagewarriors title, and that's another step up on the ladder there. You'll kind of jump on the UFC's radar. Obviously, I'd done a lot of research on Frederick beforehand, and he'd come off a huge KO as well. He actually murdered a young kid called Jamie Richardson. Knocked him out clean in the third round of his last fight. So, like I said, he's a bit of a monster of the division. No one really wanted to fight him, but I kind of knew that my style would play well with his.
And for those who haven't seen the fight, can you talk us through the fight, my brother?
It was a tough fight. I think I won the fight. I became the champion, but it was like a nasty, gritty fight. And I think with Frederick's style, whatever you've got, he'll pull you into that. Like I mentioned before, he's got this massive knockout power. He's very dangerous, and so for me, it was trying to take him down to the mat, and for him, it was trying to keep it standing. He landed some really good low kicks. He butchered my lead leg with like 2 low kicks. I've never felt that kind of power before. But as soon as I took it to the ground, I realised pretty quickly that I was the better grappler, and I managed to submit him at the end of the 4th round of a rear naked choke.
And does it look like he cuts a lot of weight, because he's a big dude, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was a little bit taller than Frederick. Possibly had 1.5 inches on him or something like that. But he's really thick, like thick in at the thighs and thick in the shoulders and whatnot. He was a big middleweight. I always kind of classed myself as almost like a mid-sized middleweight, if that makes sense. But he was definitely on the larger side, and he was big and thick and strong. And like I say, from the low kicks, I certainly felt that the power that he had.
And it was a 5-round fight, brother. And as you went through the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and into the 4th round, did you think if this went to the decision, I've got it, or did you think that there's a degree of urgency and I need to finish this?
Well, he got deducted a point in the 2nd round because he needed me illegally in the head in the 2nd. I figured I'd won the first 3, so I knew I was potentially 4 points there on the conventional 10-9 system. But I was starting to feel the pace in the 4th round. I was starting to fade. And it does, it would interest me if that 5th round would have happened, if I'd have had what it took to see through the 5th, because it was a tough, gritty, miserable fight, to be honest. It was the toughest fight of my career, definitely.
It's like you said, brother, although you won the belt, you kind of left a bit of it in the cage, right?
Yeah, not in terms of, I didn't take any damage. I'm pretty good at taking the shots on the forearms and the elbows. I mean, a lot of people said after the fight, he was hitting you hard and you could hear the slaps and that coming off. But I didn't really come out the fight with more than a scratch, honestly. I took a lot of the punishment on my forearms and my shoulders and whatnot. And in terms of a tough fight, it was very tough, kind of condition-wise. There wasn't much energy left in the tank afterwards. I remember the fight finished, and the first thing that happens is the medics rush up to you and do a quick test. And I just said to Chris Lamb, who's the lead medic in Cagewarriors, I said, "Listen, I'm okay, but I've just got to sit down and just get a bit of oxygen in." No, I wasn't concussed or beat up or anything like that. It was purely conditioning wise. I was exhausted.
I bet you were, brother. Now, the 4th round, prior to the submission, how did the fight end up on the floor? Was it him striking you, or was it you just closing the distance and taking him down?
Well, what was happening kind of, especially in the 4th, was I was so desperate to try and take him down. I was just shooting double leg after double leg, which you look back and it's, it was foolish. It didn't work the first time. It was just pulling an awful lot of energy out of me. I think it must have happened. What must have happened is he sprawled. He sprawled on my double leg. it was a little bit bizarre. I've kind of moved back out of his sprawl, and he's fell forward, and I've managed to negotiate myself around to his back and get in a choke. I didn't even have the hooks in at the time. I had, I think it was a short choke, which is very similar to a rear naked choke. And then I've applied the choke. He's fell down to his side. I've managed to get the hooks in, and that was all that it took. Then it was quite a fast tap from himself.
And brother, talk me through the emotions, knowing that you've worked so hard, and then Nathias, he says, right, that's it. I've had enough. He taps, the referee breaks you. Talk me through your emotions, knowing that you've just won the championship belt.
It was a relief, and I know it sounds really boring saying that. It was a relief to win. I would have loved to be one of those guys who had kind of just collapsed and started crying and said, "Oh my God, it's a dream come true." It certainly was a dream come true. It was on the bucket list, but I think it was more of a relief. I thank God that's over, and I've made it out in one piece. And I always said once I've won the Cagewarriors belt, that kind of chip off my shoulder would disappear. And even if my career ended tomorrow, I could still be pretty pleased that I'd won that world title. I think that's probably more than the 90% of fighters get up to. For me, that's the pinnacle on the European scene. And like I said, I want more. I want to achieve more. But if I had a disastrous knee injury tomorrow, or if I couldn't fight ever again, or if I didn't want to fight ever again, that would be enough for me to be pleased with my career.
I think when the last time we spoke, brother, you were saying about, you'd gone through, you'd had a bit of a bad run, you weren't doing that well, you were more on the losing side than the W side, and then you kind of slowly just grinded and worked your way up, and it's kind of built up over that time, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was, I lost to Jamie Richardson. I think it was a 6-6-1 record, which wasn't the record I certainly wanted. I didn't want 6 losses on my career. But yeah, I managed to turn it around. I fought George Smith, and that was like the first lockdown Cagewarriors show that they did. So there was no crowd or anything there, and I performed well against George, and that gave me a little bit of confidence the next fight, and so on and so on. I kind of, the more fights I won, the more confident I got, and the more comfortable I was in there, and it kind of finished with me winning that world title, which was, like I say, it was an achievement I was really pleased with.
And for this winning streak that you had, brother, do you kind of give credit to the gym that you're at, or was it like a mental block you had? What was it that kind of, you turned the corner and ended up on this winning streak?
I think like everything else, it wasn't just one thing. It was the main two things are what you alluded to then. One was obviously I was fighting out of a fantastic gym in Next Generation Liverpool. And then the second thing was with what you said after the Jamie Richardson loss. It was, what am I doing wrong here? Why am I putting all this pressure on myself? Why am I not enjoying the experience? And I kind of felt, certainly with COVID around at that point and nobody else was fighting, I was very grateful just to be able to even fight and do something I enjoyed. And that pulled the pressure off. And for me, if I've got no pressure, if I'm feeling confident, I fight an awful lot better. So I think the mental block was certainly the main one. And like we've said, Next Gen, you can't help but get better there as long as you turn up every day. And like I say, it paid off. And I'm quite stubborn, really. And I'm lucky in a way that there's not much else in my life that I'm very passionate about than martial arts. So there's not anything that's going to pull me away. If I was a fantastic guitar player or a painter or anything, I might say, what, I'm going to forget the fight and I'm going to put my energy into this and this. But it's not. Fighting is, I've been fighting for 20 years, and it's something that I'm very, very passionate about, and that keeps me, disciplined to go and train and want to compete in the bigger shows.
Well, the reason I ask you that question, brother, is because it reminds me of a podcast I did with Phil DeFrise, who I think you'll know as well. He's from the Northeast.
Yeah, sure.
And he's like multiple times KSW heavyweight champion. And when I spoke to him, he was saying, one, it was the gym. He needed to change the environment that he was in. But it was his mental block. He struggled with anxiety, the whole palpitations going out there, wanting to get it over and done with. And he didn't at any time kind of savor, the intro, the walk, the music, the crowd. He hated all of that. Then at some stage, with a bit of guidance and with some help from the appropriate people, he was able to deal with that mental block that he had. And now he says he absolutely savors it. And his fighting skill, not just from the physical side, but his mental side has improved so much, which is unbelievable. And it shows in how well he's doing now, right?
Yeah, sure. What I find, quite ironic really is, we'll do an 8 to 10 week training camp of training, which is very hard training. That's 3-4 hours every day. And then you'll cut all this weight and then you'll reload properly. You'll do everything perfect. Everything's gone fantastic. And then if you have this mental block on the day, it's all pointless. It's worthless. You have to be mentally ready on the day. If you haven't got it mentally, then as a fighter, you may as well not even be overstepping into the gym and putting yourself through what you do to eventually compete. I think that's what I found. In my last fight, not the Frederick fight, the fight that ran after Milan, it wasn't the result that I wanted, but backstage in the changing room, I felt fantastic. I was ready to go. And I think that's very important. For me, it was realising that I'm 31 years old now. It was my birthday on Boxing Day. I'm 31. Well, this isn't a career that can last forever. There's guys now who are competing into the 40s, which is fantastic. But there's an expiry date on us. There's an expiry date on the human body, and if you don't enjoy the experience while you're doing it, then you're really going to look back and regret it. I think regret's the best word for it. That you don't want to look back with regret. You want to look back and say, well, even if you lost every fight. I might have lost every fight, but I enjoyed it. I gave it my best, and I put every little bit of effort in there.
And you're right. You got to savor those moments, and even like they say, "Oh, Father Time," he hasn't arrived yet. They used to say that about. Remember Randy, the natural couture? They used to say about him, unbelievable. Father Time's not knocking on the door, but eventually the time comes. We're on that conveyor belt, aren't we, brother?
It does, and you've got other guys who are very similar to Randy Couture, Dan Henderson, who doesn't get knocked out for 20 years and then suddenly he's getting knocked out in every single fight. It does catch up to you. You can't run away from time. What you can do is enjoy every moment and not enjoy your losses, but learn from your losses and try again. And like you say, look back and have fond memories instead of having regrets. I know, I look back on my amateur days and I completely ruined all my amateur fights. I put so much pressure on myself. I remember losing fights and coming out and being very emotional about losing and whatnot. And and then the pressure would kind of build for the next one and the next one and the next one. And it shouldn't be like that. The reason, hopefully, why fighters fight is because they enjoy the process. And if you're not enjoying the process, or at least enjoying a large part of the process, then you've got no business stepping in and doing it.
For sure, brother. And it's sometimes you don't find out until it's too late. And like you said, all those amateur fights you had, if you'd have known what you know now, I think you would have savoured it more, right?
Definitely. Yeah, because if you're ever going to enjoy any part of your career, it's going to be your amateur days. There's no pressure. That's not to say you shouldn't be upset when you lose, because you're passionate about something, you want to do well, and you want to show everybody else how well you're doing and whatnot. Your family and your friends and your coaches. But if there's ever a time to lose and learn, it's going to be your amateur days. No one gives a toss about your amateur career. No one gives a crap about your amateur record. It gets wiped away when you go to the pro rank. So enjoy your amateur wins and losses, and when you go up to pro, then you can maybe put a little bit more pressure on yourself, but maybe not enough where you're not enjoying it anymore.
For sure, brother. Now, if we can talk a little bit about your last fight, I think that was in December, and that was against Jacky Milan. What did you know about Jacky going into this fight?
So Milan was, quite a mysterious character, really. He hadn't fought for over a year. He was I think he was 7-0 at the time, or 8-0. I think he was born in the Ivory Coast, but eventually moved to France and joined, an MMA team there. But yeah, there wasn't much on Milan. And I said in podcasts prior to this, I said, listen, this is either going to go one or two ways. He's not fought for a year. He could have been sat at home, dossing about, getting fat like most people did in COVID, or he could have really prepared and tidied up on a lot of his mistakes from his last fight. And it was certainly the second one. He'd got a lot better since his last fight. I actually thought he was a big threat. A lot of people were telling me beforehand, I'd walk through him and whatnot. And it's nice when people say that, but I saw him as a very dangerous grappler, and that's what he proved to be.
And can you talk us through the fight itself, brother?
Yeah, so again, it was a 5-round fight. It was a title fight. He was a southpaw wrestler, so I think that played a massive part in the fight. His wrestling was quite elite. He managed to take me down for good portion of the 4 rounds and really control. And although a lot of people said, he looked really strong. With Milan, it wasn't necessarily his strength. It was more his control. He would almost hover. He wouldn't kind of clamp you down like a lot of the wrestlers do. He would hover. And so you would move into, say, turtle, and he'd be there, and then you move back to mount and side control and whatnot, and he'd always just keep that that top position. The 5th round, I kind of went out guns blazing, and I don't know if you've seen the fight, Safe, but I was about 10 seconds away from finishing the fight. But he did a good job of essentially running away, and I don't say that in a disrespectful way. He survived the round and nabbed that title. But if I just pulled the trigger a little bit early in the fight and made a few adjustments, I would have still won that fight. But he was the better man on the day.
And going into that last round, brother, did you know you had to go for it on this one?
Yeah, it was pretty clear. He'd not really landed any damage or any massive ground and pound, but he had controlled the rounds quite comfortably. When the judges' eyes, and I had to go in that 5th round and go out and knock him out. That was clear to me. It was clear to the corner. I think a mistake looking back is that should have been the game plan that I put into place in the 5th round. If that was done in the the beginning of the 3rd round, I'd still be the world champion. But again, you look back, and it's easy to look back and say these things, but when you're in the heat of the moment, it's a tricky one. And like I say, he had the better game plan, and he managed to win the world title, and he deserved it on the day, honestly.
Now, you had the high and the low. You had all the emotions from the fight against Frederick. But after this fight finished, and you're backstage, can you just talk us through the emotions there?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, honestly, because you kind of tell yourself before the fight, essentially what I've just said to him: I'm a world champion. Nobody can take that away from me. If I lose this fight, I've still achieved an awful lot, and I do honestly believe that. But when you do lose something, like many things in life, you realise how important it is to you when it's gone. And that was kind of, I remember I bought a new suitcase to go down to London because the belt is so heavy. The belt weighs about 15 kilo. And then when you're going home, when you're dragging the suitcase back, it's about half the weight. And you think, oh, Christ, it's because I'm not bringing that bloody belt back home with me. But, I do, I give myself permission, if that's the right word, to be emotional after the fight. I remember they loaded us back on the coach straight away, and there was a few tears and whatnot. And I rung my brother because he'd made his way down to London, and it's cost him about £300-400 to come down on the train and stay in the hotel and whatnot. And because of COVID and whatnot, they'd loaded us straight onto the coaches and hadn't even had a chance to say goodbye or hello or thanks for coming. So I rung him up and had a little bit of a sob on the phone and whatnot. And you go back to the hotel and you clear your head, and the next day I'm ready to go again, and I'm in a very positive mood at the moment. I feel very confident that I've made the changes, and I'm really excited for next year. But certainly after the fight, it's quite emotional. It feels like a death, for that night. You don't sleep, and you're going over what happened in the fight and whatnot, and people are sending you condolences and stuff like that. And it's not easy, but like everything else, you can get over it and crack on.
You alluded to your brother there, my friend, and your brother's in combat sports. He's in the striking world, although it's not MMA in itself, but he's aware of the emotions and everything. So it's good to have someone like that to sound off to, right?
It is, and I think he was possibly more upset than I was, to be honest. There's probably not many times in our lives, certainly as adults, where we've cried in front of each other and whatnot. It has to be, something pretty tragic has happened for anything like that to happen. I mean, down reasonably strong characters and whatnot, and it affected, hearing me emotion on the phone, it affected him, and I think he was a little bit upset, and sent me a nice text afterwards, which he never does because, he's pretty stiff upper lip kind of guy, my brother. But like I say, listen, I'm 10-7. This isn't the first loss. I've had much tougher points in my career. I lost my first 2 pro fights. I was 6-1 before I went on this streak, and like I say, I think in terms of where I am now, I've been in far worse places, and I've managed to build my way out of that, and I'll manage to do the same at this as well.
So moving forward, brother, is there anything in the pipeline, or what's plans for this year?
Well, Cage Warriors is having an event on the March the 18th, hopefully at the O2, the Indigo, where I fought before, and I'm, crossing my fingers that I'm on there. I'd hope to kind of learn, that concrete kind of the next couple of weeks. I know the UFC's on the day afterwards as well, where Paddy and Molly are fighting and whatnot. So, I'll be gutted if I'm not on this March 18th card. That's something I'm working towards. I'm actually going to drop it down a weight class as well. I'm going to move down to welterweight, which I've not done for 3 years, 4 years, something like that. And that was going to be the plan, regardless, win or loss with the Milan fight. The plan was to move down to welterweight, and if I'd won, hopefully it would have been that double kind of world title thing. But even now, I want to move down, and I've working now with a nutritionist. I've wedged out a load of money for him, so I'm going to do it properly and see if I can get down to welterweight and see if I can compete in that division.
And who's the welterweight champ now? Do you know, brother?
So it's vacant. It was Ian Gary. Ian Gary was the welterweight champ, and then he's moved on to the UFC, and it's a vacant title at the moment. I imagine Matt Figleck will be fighting for it against maybe Reece McKee or something like that. Again, I know about as much as you do there, but it's a vacant title. I think I'd probably have to win 1 or 2 to even get a look in there, but it's a strong division, and that's why I'm moving down, honestly. I kind of felt like the middleweight division had lost a bit of steam after I beat Frederick. So the plan was to move down to welterweight and get a little bit of a new challenge. And I think maybe that might have affected my performance in the Milan fight as well. I kind of didn't feel as motivated as I was for the Frederick fight. And I think moving down to a really strong division in the welterweight division, I'll get that motivation back to get back smashing training and hopefully win another world title this year.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Matt Figleck. An hour ago, brother, I did a podcast with his brother Michael, Mike Figleck.
Right, okay.
And he's lightweight, and I think he's something like 7-0 now he's on. And he's saying he's knocking on that door in the hope that somebody answers and says, right, you're up for a title. Because I think he was saying somebody called Joe McColgan.
That's right.
Joe Colgan or someone who I think he had the title, but I think he's kind of vacated it now.
Yeah, that's correct. He was saying he was struggling to fit in training with work and whatnot, and so he vacated the belt. And then it was supposed to be Beddy, who was fighting George Harwick for the belt, and that fight fell through because of COVID. But yeah, the Figleck, he's certainly making his way to the title. He's done very well.
Yeah, so the good brothers as well, man, and Trojan Free Fighters is a good gym, and I've spoke to Paul Sutherland. He's a pleasant chap as well, so there's no dramas there, is there?
Very good fighters, good gym, tough Polish brothers, very good fighters. Matt's, I need to do a little bit more research on Matt, honestly. I kind of watched his last fight versus Kent Cotman, and I felt like he dominated that fight. He's big guy, 6'2", long. Probably, I'll probably be slightly bigger than him coming down from middleweight, but it'd be a good challenge. I'd love to fight him.
You'd be similar height, aren't you, brother? How tall are you?
I'm kind of knocking on 6'3"-ish. Yeah, so I'm about 6'2.5", something like that.
Cool. Well, listen, all the best for 2022, brother. And as and when there is a fight announcement, you're going to come and see us, aren't you?
Oh, definitely. I'll be on.
Matt, thank you so much. And I look forward to catching up with you soon, my brother. All right.
Cheers, buddy. Nice to see you again.